Good day, everyone. Today, I will present my paper in literary criticism entitled Navigating the Terrain of Cultural Criticism, Challenges and Implications. This presentation outlines the four most important parts of the paper. We have the introduction, which includes the definition of cultural criticism, history, and of course, the importance of cultural criticism. Part two is the theoretical framework, which includes some theoretical concepts that serve as the framework or approaches to analyzing and understanding culture. Part three provides the highlight of the paper that includes the discussion on the issues in cultural criticism, some of which are the challenges and limitations, validity and reliability, objectivity and subjectivity, and ethical concerns. And the last part will provide the conclusion, presenting the summary of points discussed in the paper and the implications of the issues to cultural criticism. Let us begin by defining what is cultural criticism. Berger, 1995, defines it as an interdisciplinary framework or approach used in literary criticism that focuses on social, cultural, and historical contexts that build the interpretation of the text. This definition puts emphasis that cultural criticism is an approach or framework used in literary analysis that interprets literature using an interdisciplinary lens such as sociology, anthropology, and history to eliminate deeper meaning of the text. So we have to understand that culture is a product of many disciplines. One can have a better understanding of the culture if we also relate it with the other subfields. MacLean simply defines cultural criticism as an approach that examines the culture in which the work was written. Also, Warner and Rausch, 1998, states that cultural criticism is describing, interpreting, and evaluating culture in the literary text. And this definition is even expanded by Martinez 2011, stating that cultural criticism is an investigation of beliefs and assumptions we all hold in common, contradictions and conflicts that exist in social groups. In summary of the definition, I made this graphic illustration to provide a comprehensive definition of cultural criticism based on the ideas of the various scholars mentioned earlier. So it can be summarized that cultural criticism is an interdisciplinary approach or framework that involves various disciplines such as history, sociology, anthropology. So by using this interdisciplinary approach, it examines, analyzes, describes cultural values, beliefs, costumes, practices, power relations, social issues, political injustices, gender, race, class, power relations, which can be inferred or located in a text, particularly its language, setting, and characters. So by considering these elements, this provides a better understanding of the literary work's meaning and messages embedded in the text. And this also provides a comprehensive understanding of how culture and literature intersects. So therefore, this idea is also supported by the idea of Appiah's 2019 statement that says cultural criticism is based on the assumption that meaning is not an intrinsic property of a literary text, but is socially constructed. It therefore emphasizes on the importance of using the interdisciplinary approach in the literary analysis. Now let's move to the history and development of cultural criticism. Accordingly, early in the 20th century, this marks the beginning of cultural criticism. So scholars this time began to study literature in the social and historical context, and opposed to the traditional literary criticism, which was predominantly focused on the formal aspects of literary works, such as the structure, the style, and the language, as a single unified way of analyzing the text. So this implies that scholars was exploring on the cultural aspects of the text in response to the limitations of his traditional way of analyzing the text that only focuses on the structure, style, and language. So that would mean that before or earlier than 20th century, the only way of analyzing the text or the literary work is using this traditional way of analyzing, which they only consider or focuses on the structure, the style, and the language. So according to Menand in 1986, during this 20th century, cultural criticism steps away from traditional criticism that concentrates too exclusively on literature, abstracting it from larger context of cultural social life. So one of the key figures in the development of cultural criticism was the literary theorist Raymond Williams in his book Culture and Society, published in 1958. He argued that culture should be understood as a product of society and something people produce and consume. So, in other words, if we want to understand culture, we have to understand society and people, because society and people play very important role in defining culture. So he argued that culture reflects the social and economic conditions of a particular place and time, and that cultural forms have social functions. So because of this perspective of Raymond Williams, this helped to lay the foundations for the development of cultural criticism. So in 1960s to 1970s, cultural criticism became more widespread and influential. So cultural critics began to challenge the traditional literary approaches, arguing that literature cannot be understood in isolation from its cultural context. So in the late 1960s and early 1970s, cultural criticism became more prominent in literary criticism. So this was the period of social and political upheaval, which was marked by movements of civil rights, feminism, and anti-colonialism. So during this time also, cultural critics challenged traditional literary analysis and focused on how literature reflects and shapes cultural ideologies and norms. So one of the key figures in this development was Stuart Hall. He was a Jamaican-born British cultural critic. Hall, along with Richard Hogarth and also Raymond Williams, was one of the founders of the Birmingham School or Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies. So they are a group of cultural critics who sought to understand the relationship between culture, society, and ideology. So Hall argued that culture is always political and should be analyzed in terms of its production and dissemination. So he emphasized the role of power relations in shaping cultural forms and the importance of understanding how audiences consume and interpret culture. So another important figure in the development of cultural criticism was Michel Foucault. In his book, The Archaeology of Knowledge, published in 1969, Foucault argued that knowledge is always situated within a particular social and historical context. He emphasized the importance of examining how power relations shape our understanding of knowledge and how cultural forms reinforce or challenge existing power relations. So if you notice these key persons would emphasize on the power relations and on how it provides constructs on the concepts of culture. So therefore, power relations would allow, no, this would allow the readers to see how these marginalized people being treated or influenced by the people in the upper class level. So when you say marginalized, these are the people who do not belong to the dominant culture. So these are the people who were deprived, who these are the people also who were less fortunate. These are the people who experience biases. These are the people who experience also discrimination in terms of gender, in terms of sex, in terms of nationality. So they belong to the marginalized people. So because of Foucault's work, this contributed a big impact in cultural criticism. So this even led to the development of Foucauldian cultural criticism. So this approach to criticism emphasizes the importance of understanding how culture and power intertwine. It also emphasizes the Foucauldian cultural criticism also as an approach emphasizes the role of knowledge, discourse, and institutions in shaping cultural forms and how these forms function within wider social, political, and economic systems. So during 1980s and 1990s, cultural criticism continued to develop. So this draws on a wide range of theoretical disciplinary perspectives. So this also provides birth and recognition of various theoretical frameworks, for instance, the feminist, post-colonialism, and also Marxist, no? So which would focus on the literary forms, forms and reflect and critique the dominant economic structure of a particular society. So in the recent years, no, in these recent years, cultural criticism has continued to evolve, reflecting societal changes and how literature and culture are produced and consumed. So in this present time, with the onset of digital media and of course the technological evolution has complicated our understanding of cultural forms and the ways in which they function within the society. So, for instance, the way we view things nowadays turns to be all inclusive of gender, which welcomes, for example, the LGBTQ plus, and everything nowadays would seems to be all in an inclusive state. So critics also have increasingly focused no, the intersectional nature of cultural identity, exploring how would this identity is shaped by multiple factors such as the race, the gender, sexuality, and the class. But why do we study cultural criticism? Or how cultural criticism contributes to literary criticism? So, one significant contribution of cultural criticism is its role in promoting understanding across cultural boundaries. So, since literary works are often produced with specific cultural contexts, cultural criticism helps to highlight the connections between these cultural contexts and values and ideologies that are communicated through literature. So, by examining the literature from different cultural contexts, readers can appreciate the diversity of human experiences, promoting empathy and understanding across cultural boundaries. So, meaning that readers would better appreciate the diversity of human experiences as exposed in the literary text, the the various cultures are being presented. So because of this can promote empathy and understanding of the readers of the cultures across boundaries. So another crucial aspect also of cultural criticism is its ability to uncover hidden assumptions and biases in literary works. So literature, like any other art form, is produced within a specific social and cultural environment and often reflects the values and prejudices of the environment. So cultural criticism can help readers to identify these biases, usually seen among the marginalized people who are deprived of the dominant culture, as I have said earlier. So the use of cultural criticism would help them explore how they affect the construction and interpretation of the literary text. So by emphasizing these assumptions and biases, cultural criticism can contribute to a more critical understanding of literary works. So this would lead to a more profound insight into the social conditions in which the literature is produced. And the third importance of cultural criticism is also cultural criticism also is essential for understanding how literary works reflect larger cultural issues. So, as literature often deals with complex issues related to identity, culture, and social dynamics, cultural criticism can help to provide a framework for exploring these issues in detail. So, later on, as part of the discussion of my paper. So the different frameworks, it will also be introduced. So as I have said, this the understanding of how literary works this could facilitate the understanding of how literary works reflect larger cultural issues by providing the framework for exploring these issues in detail. So by stressing how literary works reflect social, political, and cultural issues, readers can better understand the author's perspectives on contemporary issues and how these issues shape and are shaped by cultural values. So I'll give you an example, no? So, for an example, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain is widely considered as a classic example of an American literature, which most of us are very familiar on this novel, no? So, the novel would describe social issues, subjects such as slavery, race, and southern life. So, cultural criticism examines the novel's themes in relation to Twain's life in Missouri in mid 1800s. So this was a time of significant social and political change in the United States during this time, no? So because of this, considering the history, when was this written, and also of course what happened during this era, so critics can examine how the setting, the characters reflect and represent cultural values and attitudes at that time. So this could help them understand better on the literary works. So another example also is on the importance of cultural criticism is Toni Morrison's Beloved, which deals with themes of race, gender, and trauma. So cultural critics have explored the significance of the African American experience during the era of slavery, no? So as well as Morrison's own life experiences in the creation of the novel. So by examining the cultural context in which the novel was written, so cultural criticism helps readers better understand the literary work's themes and significance. Okay, so for the theoretical framework, there are some theoretical concepts used in cultural criticism. So which this could help better understand, and uh, this could provide frameworks or approaches to understand and analyze cultural products such as in the media, literature, and also the arts. So scholars develop these theoretical concepts from various disciplines to help the researchers and readers understand how culture is created, reproduced, and circulated, and how it shapes social relations and identities. So although there could still be more theoretical frameworks that can be used in analyzing cultures, but this paper is just limited in presenting the most common frameworks used. So as part of the limitation of this paper, I will just introduce them. I could not elaborate it in a deeper discussion because I think we need another session or chapter of a paper to go on its detailed discussion, because these are very long topics and needs to have a thorough discussion. So for the sake of understanding what are these theoretical concepts used in cultural criticism, so just allow me to give you an introduction of what are these theoretical concepts. So one is cultural hegemony. So this refers to the idea that dominant social group imposes its values, ideas, and beliefs on other groups in society. So this concept was developed by Antonio Gramsci, a Marxist philosopher who argued that cultural domination was key to maintaining social inequality. So in other words, cultural hegemony refers to the domination of a particular culture over others. So this is often achieved through a perpetuation of um, certain ideologies, certain norms and values that are widely accepted in the society. So cultural criticism, on the other hand, seeks to analyze and critique cultural practices, works of art, and social patterns that reinforce dominant power structures and equalities. No? So cultural criticism would challenge the dominant cultural narratives and power structures that perpetuate inequality using the lens of gender, race, class, and sexuality to reveal the ways in which these serve to uphold a more equitable society. So, for example, in George Orwell's novel in 1984, no? So the ruling people slogan that time was in the in this novel was war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. No, so the elite class uses language to manipulate the masses and maintain their power by saying that, or by equating that war with peace. So the elite convinces the people that the constant state of war is necessary for their safety and security. So by telling them that equating freedom with slavery, so the party or these elite people convinces the people, the masses, that their lack of freedom is actually a form of protection from the dangers of the outside world. And by equating ignorance with strength, so these elites convince the people that their lack of knowledge is actually a virtue that keeps them loyal to the group. So this example now would illustrate how cultural hegemony can be used to analyze the ways in which dominant groups in society use language and culture to maintain their power and control over the masses. So by creating a dominant culture that reinforces the worldview, like war is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength, would show analysis on how power can maintain their position of authority or dominate and suppress people's dissenting voices, as these people tend to follow the advocacy of this elites. So we can see here the power of the domination of the social group in terms of the values, the ideas and beliefs on the other groups in the society. So another one is number two is second is the structuralism. It is a theoretical framework focusing on the underlying structures and patterns that shape cultural products. So this approach was influential in anthropology, no, where it analyzed in under the underlying structures of cultural practices and beliefs according to Levi Strauss in 1967. So the structuralism has also been used in cultural criticism, no, most especially in um, analyzing the structures of media text, no, for example, in the narrative structure of the films, movies, or any media text. The third is post-colonialism. This is an approach that examines the cultural, social, and political effects of colonialism and imperialism. So this perspectives emphasizes how colonial system of power continue to shape contemporary society, including the cultural representations and discourse. So post-colonial theory is often used in cultural criticism to examine, if we want to examine representation of race, ethnicity, and cultural identity in mass media, this is usually used as a framework. And the fourth is the feminist theory. Actually, this is a very broad theoretical framework that seeks to understand and challenge the gender-based oppression and equality. So, feminist theories argue that gender is not a natural biological fact, but constructed through social and cultural practices. Cultural criticism informed by feminist theory often examines representations of gender and sexuality in media and gendered norms and expectations that are broadly shaped cultural production. So an example of this text analysis using feminist theory in cultural criticism is, for example, no, in media, no, there was this popular TV show entitled Mad Men. I think this was long time ago, no, in 19 somewhere in 19, sometime in 1960s, no. So there was this portrayal of women in the workplace, which this really shows patriarchal structures that are maintained through cultural representation. So the shows would depict a female characters as secretaries and objects of the male desire, reinforces how would it reinforce traditional gender roles and the idea that women are subordinate to men. So therefore, no, so the show's portrayal of women as objects of male desire perpetuates the idea that women's worth is determined by their sexual appeal to men and reinforces the idea that women should occupy subordinate positions in the workplace as an office secretary, as shown in this particular show. So by analyzing this show through a feminist lens, we could better understand the ways in which cultural representations of women have helped to maintain patriarchal structures and perpetuate gender inequality. So this analysis can help us to challenge, these norms and work towards a more equitable and just society in terms of gender equality. And the fifth is semiotics, no? So this framework is used to study signs and symbols and meaning in cultural product. So this approach focuses on how meaning is created through signs and symbols and how these meanings are conveyed in cultural products such as art, films, and literature. So semiotics has been used in cultural criticism to analyze signs and symbols in media and other cultural products. So I think I keep on mentioning on cultural products. No? So when we analyze cultural criticism, we do not only limit our understanding of product of cultural criticism on literature, but this would also include other products like the films and television, movie documentaries, TV shows that has cultural themes. Literature, of course, is very common when we analyze novels, poetry, short stories, and also the arts like the paintings, the sculptures that expresses cultural items and values. But as I have said, of all these cultural products, what we mostly analyze is literature. Six is Marxist or Marxism. This is a theoretical political perspectives that seeks to understand the social, economic, and political processes that underlie social inequality. So this approach has been used to analyze media ownership, representations of class and labor and the cultural industry, and this is also commonly used in a theoretical concepts in cultural criticism. So of all the theoretical concepts used, usually this is the commonly used theoretical concepts in cultural criticism, Marxist or Marxism. Seventh is the psychoanalysis. This is a theoretical framework that examines how our unconscious desires and fears shape our behavior. So this has been used to examine unconscious desires and fears, for example, in films and also in literature. So this approach has been particularly influential in analyzing, for example, if you want to analyze some horror films and also Gothic literature. So usually a psychoanalysis theoretical framework is being used. The eighth is cultural materialism. This emphasizes the role of material factors in shaping cultural production and consumption. So these perspectives argues that economic and social structures significantly impact cultural practices, so including mass media production and consumption, uh, as mentioned by Williams in 1973. So in cultural criticism, this is often used to examine how economic and political structures shape media ownership and also its content. The ninth is the cultural studies. Cultural studies is a multidisciplinary field that combines sociology, anthropology, media studies, and literary theory to examine culture's production, circulation, and consumption in the society. So cultural studies have been influential in analyzing popular culture. So this is usually used when we analyze popular culture in such as no in the film, television, music, and fashion. So this approach emphasizes how cultural products are shaped by cultural, economic, and political forces, and how they shape social and political relations. And the last one is that queer theory. This is a theoretical framework that challenges the binary categories of gender and sexuality and examines how these categories are socially constructed. So queer theory has been influential in cultural criticism, where it has been used to examine the representation of LGBTQ identities in media and other cultural products, as well as how LGBTQ plus voices are excluded from cultural production and also in representation. So as I have said this time, no, so the world is somewhat like in inclusive state, no. So we try to accommodate all uh all things, no, all classes, no, in the society. So regardless of everything, the gender, the sex, the social class, power, so everything, no. So it's somewhat like we are looking things in an inclusive state. So LGBTQ is also an issue. It has also something to do with the culture. How do we perceive um gender, no, how do we perceive or how do we accept LGBTQ in the society. So this is usually used when we examine binary gender and sexuality in cultural products. For the illustration, no, so I would like to give an illustrative text analysis using the theoretical concepts that I have mentioned. So this is a poem by Luis Rodriguez Jr. So in his poem, we can see a mixed theories used in the analysis. Remember that this is cultural criticism and that and that it uses multiple lenses as sociology, history, anthropology, and analyzing a text. So let me read. No, the poem is entitled Speaking with Hands. There were no market in Watts. There were these small corner stores we called marketas, who charged more money for cheaper goods than what existed in other parts of town. The owners were often thieves in white coats who would talk to you like animals, who knew you had no options, who knew Watts was preferred landfill of the city. She refused to leave until the owner called the police. The police came and argued too. But Mama wouldn't stop. They pulled her into the parking lot, called her crazy, and then Mama showed them crazy. They didn't know what to do, but let her go. And Mama took us children back toward home, tired of being tired. So this poem depicts an account of a mother with her children having dispute with the supermarket employees and police officers for equality and fairness in an unprivileged urban neighborhood. So this is evident that the family lives in an impoverished neighborhood that suffers from lack of healthy food due to an economically depressed community by which the author or depicts mentions the local market and the what. So there was mention about local market, which would mean that they live in in a poor community. And there was even mention of the Watts. Now Watts is a region in Los Angeles known to be one of a having low income and high crime area. So with that kind of a picture that would tell the readers that this mother, no, the mother or the children and the mother was really living in a low income community, so they are poor, no. So the son reflects on how disadvantaged and poor he was and his family were. In many stanzas of the poem there was a mention of the owners were often thieves in white coats who talk to you like animals, which clearly shows that the owners clearly felt as if they were superior to the people in the neighborhood. So by calling them, no, so by uttering those words, it would show the power, it would show the position, it would show that the owners let them really feel that the owners are really superior over these people in the neighborhood. So this is extremely obvious that the mother is a minority who speaks English as as her second language felt the need to demonstrate to her children the importance of standing for their rights as citizens. And in this part, it shows how they are being marginalized from culture because they are poor and, of course, they're struggling to speak in English. So another is the mother were called crazy. And why is going crazy is an expression of tired of being tired. Well, no, if you look at the poem, no, that's what would happen if a person have hit rock bottom. So people can only take so much, and after a while, some people just crack. So probably that's what mama or the mother did because he was just so stressed. So she just napped or give way from that dispute. No? So using cultural criticism, we can infer that Rodriguez touches on the power dynamics and questions who holds the power to communicate, be understood, and be listened in a society. No? So in the case of these marginalized people, the mother and the child, so they were experiencing this one. No? The poet shows the struggles of those who are marginalized and underrepresented. So and how they were viewed as different from the perceived norm in the society. Okay, so that's an example of how do we analyze cultural criticism using the by interrelating those different theories that I have mentioned a while ago. So we could not really use only one, but we can use two or three concepts just to really get the real meaning of the text, because that's what cultural criticism is. Also, there is an interrelated or interdisciplinary approach used in analyzing the text. So let's come to the issues in cultural criticism. So one challenge of cultural criticism is that culture is ever changing and diverse. So cultural practices vary depending on social, economic, and political contexts. So therefore, cultural criticism could lead to stereotyping and generalizing, where it might become obsolete in a short period of time. So according to Appia in 1992, cultural criticism must respect that cultures are diverse and constantly evolving. So using one particular culture to interpret a piece of literature could result in incomplete or incorrect text analysis. So there could be some changes to social norms, values, and traditions that may render culture analysis and interpretation of the text outdated, according to Lamotte and Molnar in 2002. So thus, cultural criticism has to be characterized by historical accuracy to remain reliable and comprehensive. So this is one of the characteristics which could be part of the limitation and challenges of cultural criticism. That because culture is evolving, culture is ever changing and diverse. So there might be some changes in the values, in the social norms. So uh, to uh, to avoid this kind of a problem of misinterpretation, this has to be characterized by an accuracy of the historical. This requires historical accuracy to remain reliable and also comprehensive. Okay, so number two here, and as a challenge, is that culture criticism is of course subjective. Sometimes this is very subjective for the critics and also for the readers. So as it relies on personal experiences, perspectives, and opinions to interpret the literature, readers may interpret a text differently depending on their cultural background, education, and personal values. So for example, no, for instance, a reader from a different cultural background may have difficulty understanding cultural allusions and references in a piece of literature. So therefore, cultural criticism may not achieve universal meaning, and instead it may be viewed as a bias, limited, and subject for subjective interpretation. So that's it. No? So moreover, also cultural criticism may also overlook other critical aspects of literature. So for example, it may neglect the critical aspects of literature like formalism and also um, structuralism. No, so it might neglect these two aspects, but they would just focus on the aspects of cultural criticism. But remember that cultural critics must also consider that a piece of literature might have multiple layers of meaning and significance beyond its cultural context. So therefore, it's very important, or incorporating formalist and structuralist criticism is essential in analyzing literary works. So another key concern is on the issue of reliability, whether or not the insights gained from culture analysis can be considered trustworthy. So a question in its ability to situate literary works within the cultural context might be a problem, especially in the possibility of essentializing cultures and reinforcing stereotypes. So this risk is especially pronounced when cultural criticism is applied to cultures that are unfamiliar to the critic, as it can lead to misinterpretation and misinterpretation of the culture and also in the literary text. Moreover, a threat to cultural bias is also seen as an issue. So cultural critics may be influential by their own cultural beliefs, no, their values and experiences, leading to a biased interpretation of the work, especially if the critic examines a culture outside of their own. So it can cause the critic to make assumptions about the context of a literary work that they do not fully understand. So in this case, no, according to Lamont and Molnar in 2002, cultural critics can engage in cross-cultural dialogue with members of culture working with critics from within that same culture to validate their observations and also their assumptions. And then on the other hand, subjectivity also is an issue in the sense that individual perspectives and experiences shape the culture's interpretation of the work. So it is influenced by critics' positionality, which is say, shaped by their gender, their race, class, and also the ethnicity. So for example, no, a feminist critics might have different interpretation of the work that male critics would. So by acknowledging their positionality, critics can demonstrate the significance of their subjective perspectives in the field that is not objectively accessible. So according to Brink also in 2005, that there should be a balanced approach to cultural criticism that requires writers to recognize the importance of subjective while being also being aware of the potential biases. So it must be a balance of objectivity and subjectivity to provide accurate and insightful analysis of the work. So for the ethical concerns, cultural appropriation here would refer to the appropriation of a culture's symbols, practices, or costumes without permission or respect for the culture's traditions, according to Morcari in 2017. So some of these concerns related to cultural appropriation arise in cultural criticism when critics who are not members of the culture are analyzing, comment on the meaning of culture artifacts or works, no, such as an approach may distort. So that kind of an approach, if they are not familiar with the culture artifacts and then they are also analyzing it, giving comments on it, so that can, that can distort the aspects of culture and even risk in misinterpreting the culture's values and beliefs. As a result, it is important for critics to be mindful of their positionality and to seek other perspectives when analyzing works from other cultures. Another critical concern also is using sensitive, controversial subject matter in literary works. No, for instance, the cultural criticism analysis of a novel or literary work that depicts cultural practices or beliefs that might regard as oppressive. So may provide a valuable perspective on the work. However, cultural criticism that employs reductive or insensitive language when discussing culture and social values may bolster also existing stereotypes. Therefore, a sensitivity towards how culture criticism discusses these issues is also very essential. So critics must be vigilant, use appropriate language, and present their analysis in a culturally respectful manner. In doing so, cultural critics can ensure that their analysis acknowledges the complexities of a diverse culture. Also concern involves the use of marginalized perspectives within cultural criticism. So although it is important to include a range of voices in cultural critique, but doing so carries the danger of silencing, particularly when perspectives have been silenced. So feminist critic, for example, may concentrate too much on male authors while underrepresenting women writers and perspectives. To overcome these dangers, critics must consider intersectionality and how various identities interact within the literary works. So similarly, some critics in culture criticism may also exploit marginalized people's experiences for their own gain, no, or use them to bolster the analysis. So some authors may use cultural material to gain fame while misinterpreting the culture in question. So this exploitation erodes the culture's value and deprives its rightful authors of control over the material. Thus, critics of culture criticism may ensure that they acknowledge and respect marginalization to prevent exploitation and stay mindful of its impact. Okay, so for the summary of this paper, I would just like to give the highlights of this paper, no, as a summary. the summary of the main points discussed in the paper. No? So number one, cultural criticism. In literary criticism is an interdisciplinary approach that examines literature as part of the broader cultural discourse. So this entails holistic examination of literature that considers its meanings, forms, themes, and symbols in relation to cultural, social, political, and historical context in which it was produced. So this approach is significant because it allows readers and critics to better understand how literature reflects, shapes, and responds to society's cultural values and beliefs. So by contextualizing literary works within its larger frame, deviating from the traditional way of analyzing, which only include the analysis of the structure, the language, and the literary text, cultural criticism offers richer insights into the intricate relationships and dynamics between literature and culture. The second is the history of cultural criticism. Literary studies is complex and multifaceted. One, it has been shaped by a range of theoretical and disciplinary perspectives, reflecting societal changes and how literature, culture are produced and consumed. So, although no cultural criticism have shifted over time, but the fundamental aim will still remain to understand the relationship between literature and culture and how these two intersecting spheres shape our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. The third is culture criticism plays an important role in literary criticism by providing a context to interpreting works of literature. So it offers reader a framework, no? So a while ago, I've been mentioning about this framework. So this would help understand how a piece of literature is shaped by its time, social, historical, political, and cultural context. So by analyzing literary works this way, cultural criticism enhances our understanding of the broader themes and issues that shape society while deepening our appreciation of the art. The fourth is the theoretical concepts reflect the intersectional nature of cultural criticism and highlight the importance of considering and exploring different elements that compose literary works. So utilizing these theoretical concepts in cultural criticism provides insights that help readers better understand, interpret, and analyze literature within the context of society. Fifth, cultural criticism faces challenges, of course, and limitations that must be addressed to provide a more comprehensive and inclusive interpretation of literature. So, by promoting cultural diversity, acknowledging the complexity of subjects, and including multiple theories and interpretation, cultural critics can provide an insightful criticism of literature. So for the implications, so one of the significant implications of cultural criticism in literary criticism is the understanding that no written work of art is created in isolation. Every work of literature is a product of its social and cultural context. Cultural criticism helps to account for the social and cultural context in which a literary work is produced. It enables literary critics to comprehend the meaning of text beyond its literal interpretation. Second, implication of cultural criticism is its ability to provide diverse and different perspectives on the literary work. So this approach recognizes the diversity of interpretations that different readers bring to a work of literature. Cultural criticism recognizes that readers may come from various social, cultural, and ideological backgrounds, influencing their interpretation of the text. So the different perspectives of readers lead to a diverse range of interpretation of the same text. Third, application of cultural criticism is its ability to challenge dominant cultural assumptions embedded in text. So literary works can sometimes perpetuate cultural and social norms accepted at the time of their creation. So which might not be acceptable today. No? So a cultural critic of such text would help identify and present the cultural assumptions for scrutiny. So by highlighting these assumptions and challenging them, literary criticism can contribute to social change. No? So for example, William Shakespeare's play, no, The Merchant of Venice, has been criticized for portraying Jewish characters. So the play depicts Jews as greedy, malicious, and deceitful, reinforcing negative stereotypes of the Jewish people. So cultural criticism recognizes then that Shakespeare's work was created in an era when anti-Semitism was prevalent. So in this way, it provides a contextual understanding of the play and its cultural assumptions. So, however, it can also challenge uh, these assumptions. The cultural criticism of Merchant of Venice can help identify and challenge the portrayal of Jewish characters. So it can prompt readers to question how the Jewish characters are represented in the play. So the cultural critic of this work can lead to a more nuanced understanding of the play and its cultural implications. So the fourth implication of cultural criticism in literary criticism is its ability to explore the intersectionality of identity issues in literature. So cultural criticism considers the social factors determining identity construction. So it investigates how different aspects of identity such as race, gender, sexuality, um, and class intersect with one another. Okay, and then the last one, the fifth implication of culture criticism is its ability to analyze the use of language in communicating cultural assumptions. So cultural criticism recognizes the power of language to transmit cultural assumptions. So it allows for exploring how language reinforces or challenges cultural norms. As a final conclusion in this topic, cultural criticism has thus become an important tool for analyzing literary works. The understanding of the relationships between literature and culture is incomplete without the application of cultural criticism. Cultural criticism offers a comprehensive and dynamic approach to literary criticism, making it as an essential tool for analyzing contemporary literature. So I would like to end this presentation by a statement from Moore in 2002 that indeed literature cannot be understood in isolation from its cultural context. And these are the list of the references used in the paper. Thank you very much for listening.